with President Trump and his allies' increasingly contentious rhetoric toward the American judiciary. There are growing concerns that we are ramping up to an historic clash between the president and the courts that could have dire consequences for our democracy. And by all appearances, the president is actively pursuing this collision course with the one co-equal branch of government that's currently acting as the best and most active check on his authority. He recently took to Truth Social to call on the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to rein in federal judges who are ruling against his policies. Quote, stop nationwide injunctions now before it's too late. Before it's too late. There are any number of court cases that could be the catalyst that sets off a true crisis between the presidency and the judiciary, but the most likely one at the moment appears to be Trump's invocation last week of the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 and the ensuing confusion regarding the airplanes that carried those deportees out of America. For the past week, the Trump administration has evaded directly answering a federal judge's 5 specific questions regarding the deportation of a group of 137 migrants that the government deemed to be enemy aliens. Now, during a hearing yesterday, that judge, this man, James Boasberg, the chief judge of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, remarked that the ramifications of this policy are, quote, incredibly troublesome and problematic and concerning, end quote. Crucially, Judge Boasberg is trying to determine whether the White House defied his initial order directing the government to do whatever it had to do to halt the deportations, even if that meant ordering the planes carrying the deportees to turn around as he specifically ordered they do. Those planes did not return to the United States. Judge Boasberg's exasperation over the administration's failure to directly answer whether that was in defiance of his order has been evident throughout the week. On Thursday, Boasberg said that the government's vague answers to his questions were, quote, woefully insufficient. Yesterday, he rebuked the government again for filing motions using, quote, intemperate and disrespectful language that I can't remember seeing from the United States, end quote. The Trump administration's actions have been highly scrutinized over the past week, especially by lawmakers and legal experts who've raised concerns about how this could lead to the breakdown of the rule of law. When asked by NBC's Kristen Welker if the United States is experiencing a constitutional crisis, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said, quote, yes, I do. He added, quote, democracy is at risk. Donald Trump is a lawless, angry man. He thinks he should be king. He thinks he should do whatever he wants, regardless of the law, and he thinks judges should just listen to him, end quote. Even Ty Cobb, this man, an attorney who served in the White House during the first Trump administration, remarked, quote, this is a totally lawless administration with no respect for the courts or the rule of law, end quote. For more on this, I'm joined by Lawrence Tribe. He's a professor emeritus at Harvard Law School. He's the author of numerous books, including American Constitutional Law and To End a Presidency, The Power of Impeachment. Professor Tribe, it is great to see you. Thank you for being with us. It's not great to see you on these under these circumstances, however, because we're all bandying around this term constitutional crisis. It's a term that's been used a lot in the context of the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act and the legal challenge that's brewing over how the Trump administration administered it. Some have said to me the term doesn't matter, but there is definitely something brewing right now that should be of concern to all Americans who believe in the rule of law.
Well, I agree, but I do think that looking for an explosion, a kind of moment of crisis, what physicists like to call singularity in a kind of unique episode of presidential defiance of a court order, that's misleading. It frames what we are experiencing in the wrong way. I'm reminded really of the great poem, The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot, written 100 years ago this year. He famously wrote, "This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper." For years, we have allowed the body politic to be hollowed out by a virus that attacks the very foundations of the rule of law on which the government really rests. It's a virus we have to fight with all our energy without waiting for just the right moment. You know, it's a disease, if you think about it, Ali, that reached fever pitch around the January 6th insurrection. It was our immune system failure to respond to it when the Senate let Donald Trump, the insurrectionist in chief, off the hook by voting to acquit him on the legally bogus ground that it had lost jurisdiction since the trial started too late. And then that led to the Supreme Court's refusal to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to disqualify Donald Trump. And then when the Supreme Court delayed the special counsel's prosecution, using it in the meantime to create a totally new and sweeping presidential immunity, which in turn made it easy for Donald Trump to pardon all the insurrectionists, giving them the implicit message that if they go out and crime again in his support, he'll pardon them. And the disease now is progressing to the point where really a virtual co-presidency, which is completely alien to our democracy's design, is using powers that the framers gave to Congress to create and destroy agencies, to fund and defund activities across the board, and doing it so fast, breaking things so quickly that not even genuinely independent federal courts, like Judge Boasberg, can fully keep pace with the mayhem. So that's what we're facing. Looking for the moment of crisis is like looking for the shiny object and taking our eyes off the disease that is spreading and that we really have to fight, the virus we need to fight.
I want to ask you about this thing that Donald Trump posted directed at Chief Justice John Roberts. They stop the nationwide injunctions now before it's too late. Now, there are two parts of that. Most of these injunctions are nationwide because if you've said you have to follow a process in order to deport migrants, that can't be a D.C. specific matter because then you just move the migrants to Texas and deport them. So there's that part. But the more ominous part is the second part where he says before it's too late. What does before it's too late mean when the president says that to the Chief Justice?
Well, it's ominous. He's trying to scare everybody, saying you better follow my orders or we'll never know what's going to happen. And then judges fear being shot. All kinds of terrible things are going on. But take the particular example, nationwide injunctions. Trump himself and the MAGA movement loved those nationwide injunctions when Biden was in power, and they were trying to make sure that judges would dismantle his student loan program, or that even in cases that varied state by state, unlike what you're describing, like abortion, they loved the nationwide injunctions entered by very far-right judges. But there is no alternative when the action that is in violation of the law and the Constitution, like the Justice Department's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act that was really most recently used for the Japanese internment case, Korematsu. When the administration invokes that act, when it doesn't apply to people who haven't even been determined to be within the group that is supposedly eligible for deportation, you either fly them out of the country and put them beyond reach, or you don't. So Boasberg either had to throw his hands up and say, I can't enforce the law, or he had to say, turn those planes around. That's what he did. And now we're told by Trump, oh no, these nationwide injunctions are terrible. It is hypocritical, it is lawless, and it is a provocation when the Chief Justice rightly says, you can criticize judges all you want, but don't threaten to impeach them and put a target on their backs for doing their job.
Yeah, and it's a pretty specific target. He's referred to Judge Boasberg as a radical left lunatic. This is a judge who was appointed first to the bench by George W. Bush. And then to his current role by Barack Obama. In all my reading of him, I don't know where one would find either radical or left or lunatic.
No way. I mean, he is a universally respected judge. He was put by the Chief Justice on the FISA court with other conservative judges. He's not left-wing in any sense. And when Trump says, I don't know who the judge is, but I know he's got to be radical left-wing,
right.
What's that mean? I mean, it's self-contradiction, as is so much of what the current president says.
Talk to me about this impeachment thing where it's spreading, the idea of impeaching judges. It is a very, very clearly understood matter. You and I have discussed it. Judge Ludick and I have discussed this idea that you can be very, very upset with a court ruling. And many people in America across the political spectrum are upset with many court rulings, including some coming from the Supreme Court. But impeachment is about misconduct or something that has gone wrong, not a disagreement over a legal decision.
Exactly. It's about abuse of power. It is about high crimes and misdemeanors. The last time people across the country started misusing the impeachment concept for a judge was when we had billboards all over the country saying, impeach Earl Warren over the decision in Brown v. Board of Education. Well, there were some people who disagreed with the decision, but once you start threatening to remove judges because you think they got it wrong in a particular case, however important, the whole idea of an independent judiciary crumbles. One of the pillars of the rule of law that prevents us from becoming a complete dictatorship or an oligarchy or an autocracy of some other kind is the idea that the judiciary is independent. It doesn't always have the last word. You can amend the Constitution if you don't agree with it, as I think we should amend it to get rid of that absolute and sweeping immunity that was given to presidents for committing crimes in office. But you don't threaten to remove the judge. And when you do, and couple it with the kind of provocative, violent rhetoric that we are hearing now, you have things like Judge Salas's son being killed by someone who was trying to shoot her because he didn't agree with her decision. That's not how a country that is based on law and order and self-government can ever survive. And that's why I think the virus that has been spreading ever since the January 6th insurrection has got to be combated with all the tools at our disposal. Everyone has to stand up and not simply cave in and obey in advance the way some are doing to Donald Trump's threats.
Professor, it's always an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us this morning. Professor Laurence Tribe is a professor emeritus at Harvard Law School. He's the author of several important books that law students in this country study: American Constitutional Law and To End a Presidency, The Power of Impeachment.